"The angels sent me," she said. He laughed until she told him something no one else knew. The rain hadn't stopped all day. It beat against the windows and soaked the trees lining the long, quiet road. Out by the front gate, just beyond the curve of the driveway, a small figure stood still. Daniel Whitmore wasn't expecting anyone. He rarely did. He lived alone, and most people knew not to come this far out unless they had a reason. He walked past the window, glanced out, and froze. There was a girl standing outside the gate. Maybe 7, maybe 8. Tiny, thin, soaked from head to toe. She wasn't crying, wasn't moving, just standing there, like she belonged. He stepped over to the security monitor, tapped the screen. The camera came into focus. She had big eyes and dark hair stuck to her face. She wore a red coat, too thin for the weather, and clutched something close to her chest, wrapped in what looked like old fabric. Her boots didn't match, one pink, one black. She looked like she had walked a long way, and not just today. Daniel pressed the intercom button. "You shouldn't be here." She looked straight into the camera. "The angels sent me," she said. He let out a breath. Half laugh, half sigh. "Yeah? And what did they send you for?" Her voice didn't change. She just said, "Elena, your daughter misses you." He stared at the screen. His hand hovered over the speaker button, but he didn't press it. He didn't say anything. That name, daughter, wasn't one he'd heard in a long time. Not from someone who didn't already know the story. And this girl, she shouldn't know. She couldn't know. He moved to the front door, opened it, and stepped into the rain. She was gone. Just like that. Only the empty road, the sound of wind, and the rain falling harder than before. Then, near the gate, something caught the light. Daniel walked down the steps slowly. At the edge of the walkway, right where she'd been standing, was a strip of fabric, wet, knotted tight around something small. He crouched but didn't open it. A bit of metal stuck out, just enough to catch the light. He stood there for a long time, rain dripping from his sleeves, watching the road as if she might reappear. She didn't. But something about the house felt different now, like it was holding its breath. And for the first time in years, so was he. She came back the next day. Daniel saw her from the upstairs window. Same red coat, same quiet stillness. She stood outside the gate like she had nowhere else to be. Her arms were crossed again, holding that same bundle close to her chest. He didn't go out. Not that time. But he didn't call anyone either. He just stood at the window watching. After maybe 10 minutes, she left. No words, no wave. The day after that, she came again. This time, she sat on the curb by the gate. Rain tapped softly against the stone path. She pulled her knees up and rested her head on them like she'd done it 100 times before. Daniel opened the door. He didn't walk all the way down, just stepped outside with a plastic bag in his hand, half a sandwich, an apple, a bottle of water. He set it on the edge of the porch and walked back inside without a word. She didn't say thank you, but he watched on the camera as she stood up, walked over, and took the bag. Every day after that it was the same. She came, sat, ate. She never asked for more than what he gave. She never asked to come in. But she didn't stop coming. And Daniel, he stopped pretending not to notice. One morning, when the sky was just starting to lighten and the rain had let up a little, she showed up earlier than usual. Daniel opened the door before she even sat down. He didn't say anything, just brought the bag and placed it by the steps again. But this time she looked up at him. Her hair was still damp, strands sticking to her cheeks. She held the wrapped cloth tighter than usual. "I'm not here to bother you," she said quietly. Daniel crossed his arms. "Didn't think you were." She nodded, as if that was enough. Sat down and opened the bag. He leaned against the doorframe and watched her eat. She didn't rush. She never did. She chewed slowly, like she was used to making meals last. For a while neither of them said anything. Then, without looking at him, she said, "You cry when no one's watching." Daniel froze. She didn't say it with pity, not like a child repeating something she heard. Just quiet truth, like she'd seen it herself. He didn't answer, just turned around and went back inside, slower than before. The gate stayed open a little longer that day. Not all the way, but just enough for her to notice. The girl had been coming for over a week now. She never gave a name, never asked for his. She came with the rain, the cold, even on the day the wind knocked down a tree near the gate. Daniel didn't ask where she came from or where she went after. He just started making more toast in the mornings and wrapping it in paper towels before she arrived. That morning, he brought it out warm. "Still fresh," he said, setting it down near her usual spot on the porch steps. She gave a small smile, the kind that barely reached her eyes, took the toast and held it in her lap. "Thank you," she said softly. "I like the burnt edges." Daniel sat nearby, not too close, just close enough to see her better. The sky was grey again, the kind of light that made everything feel like memory. As she ate, she hummed quietly to herself. It was soft, almost under her breath, but Daniel heard it. A tune he hadn't heard in years. Simple, gentle. A lullaby. Elena's lullaby. He felt his chest tighten. "Where'd you hear that?" he asked, sharper than he meant to. She didn't flinch, just kept looking down. "My mom used to hum it," she said, then added, "Before." He stared at her. She took another bite of toast and said like it was nothing, "Your daughter liked stars, the fake kind, on her ceiling." Daniel stood. "No," he said. She looked up, surprised. "Don't do that," he snapped. "Don't talk about her." "I didn't mean—" "I said stop." His voice rose. "You don't know anything about her." The girl blinked, quiet now. Hurt flickered across her face, but she didn't cry. She stood slowly, holding the rest of the toast in one hand. He pointed toward the gate. "Go." She looked at him for a second longer, then walked down the path without another word. He didn't call after her, didn't check the cameras, didn't open the door again that night. But later, when the house was dark and the only sound was the ticking of the old hallway clock, he found himself opening a drawer he hadn't touched in years. He pulled out a dusty tablet, powered it on, waited. There it was, a video file, marked only with a date. He tapped it. The screen lit up with a shaky recording. Elena, maybe 6 years old, standing on her bed, peeling star-shaped stickers from a sheet. "I want the glow kind," she said to the camera. "So when I turn off the lights I can still see them." She laughed. Daniel's breath caught. He paused the video, stared at the frozen frame, her face, her smile. He whispered, "To no one." "How?" The rain started up again outside, but he didn't hear it this time. She didn't come back the next day, or the one after that. Daniel told himself it didn't matter. Maybe she found a shelter. Maybe someone else gave her food. Maybe she just moved on. But by the third day, he wasn't sleeping. He kept checking the gate camera, even though it hadn't lit up once, kept glancing at the spot where she used to sit. The porch looked wrong without her. By evening, he was pacing, room to room, lights off, drink untouched. He sat on the edge of the couch, then stood again, then walked to the door for no reason at all. By midnight, he grabbed his keys. The roads were slick from fresh rain, streetlights glowing in pools along the pavement. He drove slow, windows fogged at the corners, eyes scanning sidewalks and alleys. He passed shelters, empty playgrounds, the bus station, a 24-hour diner. No sign of her. The city felt too big all of a sudden, too empty. He was about to turn back when he saw a shape through the cracked doors of an old church near the freeway. He parked without thinking, heart in his throat. Inside, it smelled like dust and cold wood. Rows of empty pews stretched down a dark aisle, and there, tucked into the last row on the left, was a small figure curled tight like a leaf. Her coat was soaked through. The bundle in her arms rested against her chest like always, but her breathing was fast, uneven. Her cheeks were red with fever. Sweat stuck her hair to her skin. "Hey," Daniel said, kneeling beside her. "Hey, look at me." She didn't open her eyes. He touched her forehead. Burning. He wrapped her in his coat and carried her out. She was light. Too light. She didn't stir. The hospital lights were bright and cold. Nurses moved quickly. Questions came fast. How long had she been sick? Where were her parents? Why hadn't he brought her in sooner? Daniel didn't have answers. He stood outside the room while they worked. Minutes felt longer than hours. Finally, a doctor stepped out. "If you'd waited another night," she said quietly, "she might not have survived." Daniel closed his eyes. "She'll need rest, food, someone who stays." He nodded. The doctor hesitated. "We're required to report this to Child Protective Services." Of course they were. Daniel looked through the window again. Hope lay still in the bed, small under the sheets. Her bundle, the cloth-wrapped thing she never let go of, sat on the table next to her. She'd brought it all the way with her. Even now she was still holding on. He brought her home 2 days later. The fever had broken, but she was still weak, pale, quiet. Her eyes looked smaller than before. She barely said a word during the drive, just held the bundle on her lap, fingers curled tight around it. When they reached the house, she hesitated outside the front door. He waited without saying anything. She stepped in on her own. Daniel didn't put her in the guest room. He led her upstairs, down the hallway he hadn't walked in over a year, and opened the door to a room he thought he'd sealed forever. Elena's room. The stars were still on the ceiling. The bedding had been changed, but the shape of the space was the same. A soft pink lamp on the dresser, a bookshelf that still held dog-eared fairy tales. A stuffed rabbit sat on the pillow like it had never been moved. Hope looked around, then climbed into the bed slowly, pulling the covers over her shoulders. She didn't say thank you. She didn't have to. He stood in the doorway a while, then pulled it almost shut, left a crack just in case. That night, the house was quiet. In the morning, he found the sheets rolled up in a bundle, stuffed under the bed. She was already awake, sitting cross-legged in the corner, staring at nothing. Her clothes were clean. He'd laid out some of Elena's old ones, but her face was tight with shame. He said nothing, just took the bundle, replaced the bedding, and brought it all downstairs like it didn't matter. Then he made breakfast. Scrambled eggs, toast, barely burnt, a glass of orange juice she barely touched. She sat at the table, shoulders hunched, but her eyes kept watching him, waiting for something. A scolding, a rule, a door closing. None came. He poured her more juice. That was the first time she smiled in the house. Small, quick, but real. A few hours later, the doorbell rang. Daniel opened it to find a woman in a grey coat holding a clipboard and a badge. "Mr. Whitmore?" she asked. He nodded. "I'm from Child Protective Services. We received notice about a minor in your care. I need to ask you a few questions." He stepped aside. "Of course." She looked around the house as she walked in. Her eyes moved from the furniture to the photos on the walls to the stairs. "You live here alone?" "Yes." "And you've taken in a child with no legal guardianship?" "She was sick. I couldn't leave her in the street." The woman didn't write that down. She just raised an eyebrow. "People don't expect this from someone like you." Daniel said nothing. "I'll need to speak with the girl, alone, if possible." Hope was standing at the top of the stairs now, barefoot, watching. The CPS worker gave a small smile. "Hi there. I'm here to make sure you're okay." Hope didn't answer. She just came down slowly, one hand trailing along the banister. Daniel stepped back, let her choose. She walked straight to his side. Didn't say a word, but she didn't let go of his sleeve. That night, Daniel stood in the hallway for a long time before knocking. The door was slightly open. A warm yellow glow spilled from the lamp by the bed. Hope sat up against the pillows, one of Elena's old storybooks resting on her lap. She hadn't opened it. She looked up when he stepped in. "I thought maybe," he said, clearing his throat, "you'd like a story." Hope nodded. He sat on the edge of the bed, unsure. He hadn't read out loud since Elena was alive. His voice felt too big in the quiet room. But before he could start, Hope spoke. "Do you want me to tell one instead?" He shrugged. "Sure, She didn't use the book. She just started talking. Soft voice, slow and steady, like she'd told it 100 times. There was a little girl who lived in a yellow house with a big backyard. She liked climbing trees and drawing pictures of the sky. At night, she'd sneak into her dad's room and pretend she wasn't scared of the dark. Daniel's breath caught. She kept going. She had glow-in-the-dark stars on her ceiling, and she'd stick one on her dad's forehead when he fell asleep, so he'd have star dreams too. That's what she called them. Daniel stared at her. Everything she said, every word, was Elena's story. He hadn't heard it since her 8th birthday, when she made it up during a power outage. He remembered sitting with her under a flashlight, listening as she invented a world made of glowing stars and paper wings. Hope's voice got quieter. She always wore a bracelet, a gold one, with a little sun charm. She said it helped her feel brave. Daniel's eyes dropped to Hope's wrist. She was wearing it, a tiny gold bracelet, sun-shaped charm dangling gently as she moved. He stared. He flashed back to Elena's 8th birthday. She opened the box and gasped, holding the bracelet up to the light. "It's a sun. Like me," she'd said, laughing. "You said I'm the sun." That bracelet. He gave it away after the funeral, donated it with a box of her clothes, thinking he'd never want to see it again. Now it was here, on this child's wrist. He stood up slowly. "Where did you get that?" he asked. Hope looked at it like she'd forgotten she was even wearing it. "I don't know," she said. "A store, maybe. Or maybe it was left for me." Daniel opened his mouth, but nothing came out. He looked at her, really looked, same size, same laugh, same way of tilting her head when she was unsure. He felt something shift inside him, deep and quiet, like the floor of the ocean moving. He didn't speak again that night, but he didn't sleep either. The house smelled like smoke and sugar. Daniel followed the scent into the kitchen, where he found Hope standing on a stool in front of the oven, fanning the air with a dish towel. The counters were dusted with flour, a cracked egg sat in a measuring cup, and the cookie tray on the stovetop held 2 kinds of cookies, golden brown and nearly black. Hope looked over her shoulder with wide eyes. "I was going to surprise you," she said. Daniel looked at the tray, then at her, then back at the tray. A laugh slipped out of him, quick, unexpected, real. He didn't even recognize the sound at first. It felt rusty, pulled from somewhere deep, like a door that hadn't been opened in years. Hope grinned. Was that a laugh? He covered his mouth, still smiling. "I think so." She looked proud of herself. "It sounded good." "Oh, did it?" She nodded. "That's what your heart sounds like, when it remembers." Daniel didn't answer, but something in him settled. He picked up a half-burnt cookie, took a bite, and made a face. Hope laughed this time, bright and full. They spent the rest of the afternoon wiping down the counters, scrubbing the tray, and trying again. The second batch turned out better, mostly. That night, Hope didn't ask to keep the hallway light on. She climbed into bed with her bundle beside her and closed her eyes, without a word. Daniel stood at her door for a while, then turned off the lamp. In his own room, he sat on the edge of the bed, the sound of that quiet laughter still echoing faintly in the back of his mind. It had been years since sleep came easy, but this time, it did. Dr. Lowell had been Daniel's therapist years ago, back when the world first fell apart. He hadn't seen her since Elena's funeral. He never cancelled, he just stopped showing up. But she came now, by invitation. Daniel had called her, not really knowing why. Maybe he thought she'd understand. Maybe he just wanted someone who remembered who he used to be. She stepped into the house with quiet shoes and a soft coat and looked around like someone walking through memory. They sat in the sunroom. Rain tapped the windows again, as it always seemed to lately. "She's not a relative?" Dr. Lowell asked gently. "No." "Then why is she here?" Daniel hesitated. She didn't have anywhere else. Dr. Lowell watched him. "You're giving her food, clothes, a room. You've put her in your daughter's bed." Daniel looked away. "She needed it." Dr. Lowell nodded slowly. "Daniel, I have to ask. Do you think maybe you're seeing something in her that isn't really there? She wore Elena's bracelet, he said, told a story she couldn't have known. Coincidences feel heavier when we're grieving. She hums Elena's lullaby. Children pick things up. You'd be surprised what sticks. He didn't argue. She leaned forward. Daniel, you're a good man, I know that. But this girl, she's been through something. And you're not her father. You're a man who lost a child. And that wound doesn't just close because someone new walks through the door. She's not just someone, he said. Even more reason to be careful. I don't say this lightly, but you might consider finding her proper care. Somewhere stable. Maybe even a facility until social services can... No. Daniel's voice came low but firm. Dr. Lowell sat back. You have to think long-term. This isn't healing if it's a fantasy. He didn't answer. He just stood and walked her to the door. Daniel, she said before leaving, be kind to her. And to yourself. But don't confuse the two. He didn't sleep that night. But he didn't know that Hope hadn't either. She had been sitting on the stairs the whole time, just out of sight, listening. Later, when the house had gone still, she walked quietly back to her room. She folded her clothes into a pillowcase, slow and neat, took her bundle, left the bracelet on the nightstand. Before leaving, she placed a note on the kitchen table. The handwriting was small and careful. The house felt hollow without her, not just quiet, empty, like something had been peeled away and taken with her. Daniel found the note just after sunrise, beside the untouched breakfast he'd made out of habit. He read it once, then again. Then he grabbed his keys. The streets were still damp from the night's rain. He checked the shelters first, then the train station, the bus depot. He circled through alleys, underpasses, behind restaurants. Nothing. Hours passed. The city blurred. Then, just before noon, he saw her. She was in a corner of the park, sitting alone on a concrete ledge. Her hair was pulled back in a crooked ponytail, and she was dragging a stick through the dirt. Stars. She was drawing stars. Daniel parked without thinking, got out, walked. She didn't look up right away. When she did, she didn't move. Just watched him come closer. He knelt in front of her. No speeches, no anger, no apologies. Just, please come home. Hope's eyes were tired, older than a child's should be. Is it really my home? She asked quietly. Daniel nodded. It is, if you want it to be. She stared at him for a long time, her fingers still holding the stick. Then she let it drop. She stood. She walked to him. And for the first time since she showed up at his gate, she reached for his hand. The kitchen smelled like toast again. Hope sat at the table, legs swinging gently beneath the chair. Her hair was brushed, though a few strands still stuck out near her ear. Daniel poured orange juice, set down plates, and sat across from her without a word. She reached into her pocket. Made you something, she said, sliding a crumpled piece of paper across the table. He opened it slowly. A drawing, rough and childish, but careful. 3 people stood under a bright yellow sun. One tall, one small. One with long hair and a soft smile drawn in pink. There was no label, no names. But he knew. It was her. It was Elena. It was him. They were holding hands. She'd drawn the bracelet on her own wrist, a tiny gold circle scribbled in with care. Daniel stared at it, his fingers shaking just a little. He didn't speak at first, just pressed the paper flat with both hands, trying not to crease the image further. When he looked up, his voice came low. I couldn't save her. Hope didn't look away. But you're saving me, she said. He dropped his head into his hands, and for the first time in so long, not a sharp cry, not a broken sob, just tears. Quiet, full, true. Hope reached across the table and touched his arm. She didn't say anything else. She didn't have to. The sign went up on a Tuesday. Simple letters, no spotlight, no big announcement. The Millionaire Project. A home for children who had nowhere else to go. No speeches, no cameras, just open beds, warm meals, and a place to belong. Daniel didn't call the press, didn't send out a statement. Still, word spread. Some of the neighbors whispered, "Just a publicity stunt. He's trying to fix something too late. He lost his mind after his daughter died. Now he's playing house." Daniel heard it all, didn't care. He was too busy turning his daughter's memory into something that reached forward instead of clinging back. He turned Elena's room, the one Hope had once tiptoed into a small art studio. He kept the stars on the ceiling, but the bookshelf held crayons now, paints, sketch pads. On the windowsill, a mug held drying paintbrushes beside a sun-shaped bracelet, resting like it had finally found where it belonged. Hope spent hours in there. She didn't talk as much when she worked, but Daniel didn't mind. He'd sit outside the door sometimes, reading with the door cracked open, the same way he had years ago. One afternoon, a different CPS officer showed up. A new face, not the woman from before, younger, quieter. She asked the usual questions, inspected the kitchen, looked at the records Daniel had started keeping, school enrollment, medical forms, everything real now. Then she asked if she could speak with Hope. Daniel nodded. Hope led her to the art room. They were in there for a long time. When they finally came out, the officer smiled politely, thanked Daniel for his time and walked to her car. She didn't say much, but 3 weeks later a letter came in the mail. The case was closed. No follow-up needed, no further investigation. Daniel placed the letter in a drawer, not to forget it, but to remember it wasn't the end. It was a door, one he had finally opened. The rain had returned, light this time, just a soft tapping against the windows like the house was breathing again. Hope sat on the couch with her knees tucked under a blanket, sketching stars on a scrap of paper. Daniel stood by the fireplace, holding a mug that had gone cold in his hands. He watched her for a moment, then said it, carefully, gently. "If I made it official, would you stay?" Hope froze, not dramatically, not in fear, but like the words had landed deeper than expected. She set her pencil down, didn't look at him right away. "I want to," she whispered. "But people always leave." Daniel felt something sharp in his chest. Guilt, maybe, or recognition. He didn't answer right away. Instead, he walked to the hallway closet, the one with boxes he hadn't touched in years. He pulled down a small white one marked Eleanor. Keep in black marker. He sat beside Hope and opened it slowly. Inside were tiny things. A barrette, a crumpled drawing, a birthday card, and a sealed envelope. To Dad, only if it's been a long time. His hands trembled as he opened it. The paper was thin. The ink a little smudged, like her hand had pressed too hard. He read it aloud. "If you ever find a reason to smile again, let her in. She's yours now. You don't need to keep looking for me in the sky. I'm already where you are when you laugh. Love, Eleanor." Hope's eyes filled with tears. She tried to blink them back. Then she leaned against him, small and shaking. "Yes," she whispered. "I want to stay." Daniel didn't speak. He just wrapped his arm around her and held on. Not too tight, just enough. The rain kept falling outside, but inside the house there was only warmth. The Elena project no longer looked new. It looked lived in. Walls were filled with colors, finger paint suns, handprints in every shade, paper hearts, taped up spelling tests and crooked rainbows. The halls echoed with laughter, sneakers squeaking on polished floors, music drifting from an open door somewhere. The front windows were open, and golden light poured across the playroom floor. Hope stood in the middle of it all, holding her newest drawing. She wore a paint-smeared smock, her hair pulled back with a paperclip, her face focused. She picked a spot near the window, just above the bookshelf where small hands could still see. She taped the paper carefully to the wall. Daniel stepped in behind her, pausing when he saw the drawing. 3 people drawn in bright strokes. Hope in the middle. On one side, a girl with long hair and a soft smile, Eleanor. On the other, a man with glasses and a kind expression, Daniel. All 3 holding hands beneath a golden sun. He knelt beside her quietly. His voice came softer than it had in years. "You were right. The angels did send you. Hope looked up at him, her smile gentle and steady. They always send someone, she said. You just have to open the door. Daniel didn't answer. He just reached out and held her hand. Small, warm, and real. Outside, wind moved gently through the trees. Inside, the light held.